So it's Wednesday, the 2nd of October, 2024. Today is the Libra full moon for 2024 and the eclipse, the solar eclipse of this fall eclipse cycle. We had the Pisces, this is wrong. It's the Libra new moon solar eclipse. We had the Pisces, I wrote it down wrong, so I read it wrong. The Pisces full moon lunar eclipse a couple of weeks ago, setting in motion its own kind of brand of discord amongst things and creating a whole lot of interesting waves around the world. Lots has happened. Today, we get the energy of this new moon. So it's the Libra new moon. We're setting ourselves inside a new cycle of connection and collaboration and corrective discourse, which is perfectly relevant. The corrective discourse is something that's absolutely essential to modern humanity in general. We have to be able to speak and exchange and to debate and things like this. The Libra new moon, in any normal circumstance, we would set clear intentions. We would set our intentions like you do the standard new moon intention setting, and you put that energy into the universe and you let the universe do some things with it while you also do some things with it. The eclipses, though, are a bit different. The new moon eclipse is a kind of dramatic doorway. Because it's a new moon, we're setting this whole lunar cycle with the energy of the eclipse. So we don't end this kind of frequency as we move past the full moon. It just kind of becomes stronger and stronger until the full moon, and as it reaches the full moon, we start to get a better idea of how the new moon has affected us, how the eclipse has affected us, and then we kind of get to integrate and appropriately dissipate some of that energy. So we have the new moon, we have the eclipse. Eclipse peaked at 11:45, 5 minutes prior to 5 minutes prior to the full moon. It's the new. I don't have a pen. It's a new moon eclipse. The new moon peaked at 11:50. The eclipse itself, the solar eclipse, which was visible mostly from the Pacific and southern South America, peaked at 11:45. And the precise alignment of the full moon itself, I'm going to do this a dozen times before we're done. The precise moment of the new moon itself has the sun and moon together in the skies at 10 degrees of Libra. So we're just past the first kind of third of Libra. 10 degrees of Libra, and the most notable parts of this, the most powerful and potent, because it's an eclipse, we have to include the south and north nodes of the moon, because they're the things that actually are the alignment points for the eclipses. We have the south node of the moon conjunct the sun and moon at 6 degrees of Libra, so it's a little off. But it's only 4 degrees, and it's plenty of energy to pull it directly into the overall theme for the month. So the south node brings us into the themes of allowing for the release, allowing for the old to die and the new to begin, allowing for us to move out of old structures, old themes, and old preordained and pre-orchestrated things and move towards something new. And considering it's Aries North Node opposing this, Aries being the sign of that which is new, the sign of beginnings, the sign of that which has only just moved past the state of idea. It's an awareness of the new thing and can move forward. So that being the opposition point, this is the point where we release. Contrary to the new moon energy where we start to build, we need to allow the release to happen so that the continuing cycles after this are allowed to kick into gear the new things that we're trying to build, that we're trying to make happen. So we have the South Node in Libra with this new moon in Libra. More tightly connected, but more tightly connected, no but, just more tightly connected to this is the planet of Mercury at 11 degrees of Libra. So it's a little more than a degree away. The planet Mercury, communication and social exchange of information and the movement of energy and the act of short travel. Interesting. I wonder how that's going to tie in. I don't know why I wanted to say that. We're going to play with it later. So the planet of communication, the planet of movement of energy, the planet of that rules the nervous system, the movement of electrons and electrical information throughout the whole human form, and by extension through the electromagnetic field surrounding each human being and how that interacts with the electromagnetic field of other human beings and animals and plants and rocks and the earth itself, and how that all plays together. This is all very mercurial. It's this constant movement of information and energy. Mercury playing part in a new moon Libra eclipse. We see themes of connectivity and collaboration, and what kinds of connections need to fade, and what kinds of connections represent the kind of old idea of what we are and what we're being and what we're becoming. The mercurial element of that. There must be new perspectives brought into play. So I guess driving maybe is a metaphor in this one. You're moving down the highway, and maybe you have an aim or a particular place you're going to. Obviously, you're going to somewhere which is arguably more favorable for whatever circumstance you're in. Otherwise, you wouldn't be moving at all. So you're moving forward, and the constant change of perspective, the scene aside you is always changing throughout that process of moving down the freeway. You have a path, you have a directive, and potentially, if you're not just driving around for the fun of it, you have a destination. But the scene, the perspective around you is constantly changing, and Mercury is that change of perspective. It is the change of scenery within and without the mind. So the ability to be in an expanded perspectival place is called for in this. So the Libra new moon eclipse, we get the unification of the conscious embodiment. That's the wrong word. The conscious projection and the unconscious and subconscious experience. The subtle space of the moon and the what's the obvious of subtle? Pronounced. There we go. The subtle nature of the moon and the emotional realms and the subconscious and unconscious minds and the realms of instinct come into exact unification with the pronounced energy of the sun, the conscious awareness, and how we bring our conscious awareness to bear on the earth. That conscious awareness requires in this eclipse space an expanded perspectival field, You have to back up, zoom out a little bit, and see more of the picture, and move enough so that you change your view of things. So there's a lot of exchange of energy that happens within that. There's a lot of movement of energy that happens within that. So the eclipse calls for the changing of perspectives, the moving of yourself from one locational direction to another, so that you can just change how things are seen and understood, and what information reaches you because you're in a different place from a different ideal perspective. The next part of this, the challenge, well, it's all a challenge. It's a challenge to move and change and do different things and to understand the world differently. And arguably a conjunction is favorable, but it's more of a neutral thing. It can manifest itself powerfully in favorable and seemingly unfavorable ways, depending on how this particular eclipse affects you. Speaking of, if you have planets in the cardinal signs, or substantial placements in the cardinal signs, your sun, your moon, your rising, or if you have other things affecting you in the cardinal houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10. If you don't know the houses in your birth chart, then you should talk to an astrologer or study it online or whatever. But to understand where this eclipse falls in your chart is one thing, and also to understand what cardinal energies are affected for you in particular. These cardinal signs, again, the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, all very powerfully influenced by this eclipse. The challenge, the more direct and nuanced challenge of this, Mars, the planet of conflict and resolution. Because we can't just have the conflict, we also have to have resolution. The idea for the full strength of Mars to manifest is to be able to engage in necessary conflict and to find necessary resolution through that conflict. And there's other elements of things that come into play, namely Venus, the ruler of this eclipse, which is important, and I'm going to touch more on this later. But Venus and Mars rule signs that oppose one another. So we have Venus, and also in the traditional astrology. So Venus rules Libra and Taurus, and Mars rules Aries. And traditionally, before the discovery of Pluto, was placed as the primary ruler of Scorpio. So we have Venus and Mars opposing one another in each of these dynamics. The Mars and Venus rulership opposing these two things. Mars brings challenge and conflict, and Venus brings resolution, or is more focused toward resolution. Mars, the conflict has to be resolved. It is the initiative of conflict, and it has to have the balancing point. So Venus and Mars are both engaged in this thing where one engages in the conflict, the other engages in the resolution. And they each are vice versa. So Mars is experiencing the resolution, and Venus is experiencing the conflict. So the disharmony, the challenge from Mars in Cancer, a few degrees off of an exact aspect, an exact energetic connection, so still affected or affecting this eclipse. Mars in Cancer holds us in a space of challenging emotional call and response. So the conflictual nature of Mars is bringing us into conflict through an emotional space, which Mars is it's an emotional planet. It's not considered necessarily the planet of emotions, but it's definitely descriptively emotional. Anger and passion and will. These are all emotional spaces. They're not tangible. They're not fully like tangible, logical things. That's Mercury's job, which is also playing a part in this. But Mars brings in this energy of emotional conflict or emotional turmoil, which leaves us with the awareness of the things that we are not yet finished with, the things that we're not yet fully understood. When we have a memory basically longer than 18 months or 2 years, that still holds an emotional weight, where it still brings us an emotional reaction that is visceral and uncontrollable. This is called trauma. So the idea behind Mars bringing in the emotional turmoil and bringing in the awareness of emotional turmoil is to bring us into a space where we're able to understand better the things that we need to resolve, the things that we need to let dissolve, and that we can allow to fade off into history, because we've held on to them for too long, and now is a time where we're able to understand them more cleanly and clearly, and we can realize that the body holding these things is burdened unnecessarily. So we can let them go, we can let them be, we can let them dissolve. The harmony between Mars in Cancer and Virgo, Mars in Cancer and Venus currently in Scorpio, holds, again, it's a slight separation, but Venus gets more power in this because there's an eclipse in Libra. So Venus in harmony with the planet Mars, Venus in Scorpio, bringing in a kind of emotional depth and a courage in the emotional space that doesn't exist with Mars in Cancer, where Mars in Cancer is reactive to emotional stimuli that is old and has been buried. Venus in Scorpio brings this kind of laser sharp ability to dive into the emotional wounds and to understand them, to dissect them, to pull them apart. So with Venus in Scorpio, it's a very potent time in general, whether there's other things going on or not. Where Venus is in Scorpio, the ability to dive deeply into the wound is amplified. It's helped by Venus in Scorpio. Venus is this energy of beauty. It's a soft understanding and compassion for the wound, or for anything really. When we find Venus, this softer experience in Scorpio, which it's not particularly harmonious there because it's the ruler of Taurus. It's the ruler of Taurus, so it doesn't quite harmonize with the Scorpio energy. But Venus bringing us through this capacity for emotional depth that exists almost nowhere in the astrological possibilities. The emotional depth that's necessary to be able to actually dive into the things that come up as a result of Mars bringing these emotional challenges helps us along the way. And also a harmony between Mars and Saturn. So we have this grand trine between Mars in Cancer, Venus in Scorpio, and Saturn in Pisces. And Saturn is actually tied a little more tightly to the Mars energy. Saturn bringing a kind of practicality, or an attempt at practicality. If we're tapping into the things in a way that we understand practicality is necessary, then it manifests. Otherwise, if we're just moving through it, just roughshod through the whole thing, not understanding that the practicality is of service to the emotional space, then we fall into the Pisces kind of dissemblance of things. Now, the other part of this that helps, Saturn in Pisces, helping us to dissolve the unnecessary constraints that we've held before. Again, the emotional spaces that have challenged us in our current life that came from extraneous nonsense before, which was obviously not extraneous nonsense before, but has now become something that is irrelevant or should no longer have hold over us. We're able to think of this in the sense of Saturn, the practical and methodical, playing out through the spiritual and mystical of Pisces and allowing for a kind of moving of the borders where it doesn't necessarily have to happen on a fully conscious level, but Saturn brings about this shift of the boundaries that allows for the new form to take shape outside of the effect of the old boundary, which was unproductive, which has become unproductive, served a purpose, no longer serves a purpose, only now impedes further development. So to sum all of that mess up, the Libra eclipse, Sun and Moon conjunct in a new moon in Libra, we're setting off a whole new lunar cycle, and we're also setting in a frequency for now between this full moon eclipse and this new moon eclipse and I believe I can't remember now. It's the Aries Libra dynamic comes up once again in the spring of next year. So we're setting in a frequency between this eclipse and the next set of eclipses. But in particular, that Aries Libra dynamic eclipse that happens, there's one just like this set where it's Pisces Virgo, and there's a second eclipse which is Aries and Libra. I believe it's the Aries new moon eclipse next spring, which holds that frequency once again. So we're setting in motion this set of eclipses, a frequency of deep emotional challenges in the context of our relational space. Like, how are we interacting with and moving energy between people? Libra is all about the collaborative space. How is it changing what we actually enact in our lives? What connections have to be severed for the sake of our own health and happiness and production throughout our upcoming portion of life? What connections need to be formed or reformed or reformulated or strengthened, whatever, however you want to think about it? What connective tissue needs to be altered, whether it's in the form of severing or serving, so that you can most greatly move forward. Venus gives us the depth. Saturn brings us a structure, but also the ability to change current structures, and Mercury gives us the kind of analytical speed necessary to move with the changes that happen as a result of the eclipse energy locking in and moving us forward. So we're officially done with the peak of the eclipse. And let's see here. I'll check real quick while I'm sitting here. When does the eclipse officially end? The official end time that's ambiguous wording on this particular site. Anyway, 2:47 p.m. 2:47 p.m. Los Angeles time, and the eclipse ends somewhere, about 2,000 miles to the east of the very southern tip of South America. So that's that. the eclipse is always powerful, and sometimes the effects are very dramatic and immediate, and sometimes they play out in a kind of slow burn fashion over the next period of time. The other thing that sets in powerful frequency, which is a repeating theme because it's kind of a long-standing thing, but Pluto retrograded back into Capricorn recently, and it will be there until mid to late November. The aspect that it's set into is this kind of energized harmony between Pluto in Capricorn, Neptune in Pisces, and Uranus in Taurus. These three are these kind of outer planets, the rulers of the development of human consciousness beyond the material plane. It's the abstraction, it's the individuation and the understanding of the soul and its multiple incarnations throughout time. I'm going to have to find a better way of saying it than throughout time, because it implies a linear thing. We don't necessarily incarnate in linear fashion, and we may or may not actually be incarnating as individual souls, but rather as a singular source soul multiplying itself for the sake of experience. But that being said, these outer planets direct our development into the next stage of human existence. So as we find them, they become markers and archetypes of new realms of human development, which, if you think about that, it's pretty interesting, because we kind of assume that as we understand ourselves, we just assume that people of the past were understanding things the same way, which is not the case at all. A lot of what's happening in the world is a result of the change. A lot of what's happening in the world is a result of that dramatic change, and yet we view much of history as through the lens of this without being able to understand the difference beforehand, the difference between now and who we were as a humanity before. So it's a very complicated thing. It takes a lot of abstraction. It takes a lot of deeper understanding. So we're in the like baby stages of the next form of human evolution. And it's so wild to see everything that's coming up as a result. Yeah. I better do this real quick. This month, I believe. So now, between now and the next new moon, this lunar cycle, this lunar cycle is very potent. Obviously, I've been yapping at you about it. The things that transpire and the realizations that become evident within this, because Libra is inevitably connected to the discourse that happens around legal contracts and binding agreements and things like that. As we endeavor ourselves through this, much will be revealed and understood more clearly and cleanly, and it will give us it'll give us a stable foundation on which to stand with any luck. As we move into a very potent election season. So open yourself to new perspectives. Try to understand things differently. Try to have conversations that you wouldn't necessarily have or allow yourself to be in a conversational space that you wouldn't necessarily insert yourself into, so that you can understand different things and gain new perspectives and new ideas, and you can rearrange your own thought processes and allow for your emotional reactivity to be not your driving force and your deciding factor, but a marker for the things that you need to resolve within your own self. So that as you make decisions, you're clearer on what is motivating the decision. If you allow for something that is old, outdated, reactive, toxic, and misunderstood to make your decisions today, then your tomorrows will continue to be challenging and will continue to manifest the same energy as that old thing. You have to allow for yourself to update. That is what the eclipses are for. It is for updating on an individual and societal level. It moves us forward, evolves us as human beings. And we can hardly begin to understand what those mechanisms are. But it is. It is what happens. So anyway, that's all I have. That's probably well enough. That's probably more than enough. Have an awesome day. Enjoy the rest of this eclipse moment. The lunar cycle will be powerful and potent, and I hope that you move through it with grace and rich perspectival awareness, and just embrace the coming changes. Yeah.